This program is provided by Universal Genesis.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are tackling, well, one of the most fundamental questions in how we organize ourselves as human beings. It's a question that connects, ancient history to some really cutting-edge philosophy.
It really does.
Our mission is to analyze this core dilemma. Can a society actually pull off a diverse, sort of polytheistic system with multiple competing values? Or is strong, centralized order autocracy simply unavoidable for stability?
That is the ultimate tension, isn't it? And it forces us to confront what we even mean by political progress, because historically, this idea of a truly diverse, multi-valued society, it's not treated as a starting point.
Right.
It's often viewed, philosophically and politically as the hard-won final goal of human history, the peak of maturity.
And the sources we looked at really confirm the listener's starting premise here. If a society lacks those established systems of trust, a shared legal consciousness, common fundamental values, it's exactly the basics, then stability often demands a strong central power. Autocracy is, in a way, the default setting for societies in those early foundational stages.
That's right. When you look at history, whether it's the ancient Chinese imperial system or, say, the Roman Empire, stability required control when that social maturity was absent. But we do have to be really precise about the kind of diversity we're talking about.
Okay.
Because a functioning polytheistic society, historically speaking, wasn't chaos.
It wasn't just unbridled tolerance for everything and anything.
Exactly. When ancient societies had many gods, which is to say many values, they almost always had a superior force. Think Zeus in the Greek pantheon, or Amaterasu in ancient Japan.
The boss god.
The boss god, yeah. That superior force acted as the ultimate arbiter. It maintained sequence and order among all the competing deities. So true polytheism, politically speaking, is ordered diversity. It's not just chaotic coexistence. The moment you remove that mediating power, diversity tends to just collapse in on itself.
So what happens when we jump to the modern world? I mean, we've got globalization, mixing cultures, technologies fragmenting how we communicate, and those common myths, those shared moral foundations that used to bind us, they're essentially gone.
Our Zeus has vanished.
He's left the building.
And that is the modern paradox of freedom. When that unifying center is lost, unbridled diversity, paradoxically, starts to erode freedom itself. You see opinion fragmentation, these constant, intense clashes over everything from political correctness to history. And this slide into infinite relativism is followed almost inevitably by new forms of conformist totalitarianism, where, group pressure enforces speech conformity.
It's the mob replacing the monarch.
Precisely. To truly coexist in this kind of decentralized environment, just tolerating each other isn't enough. Tolerance just means I'll put up with you. What we actually need is what the sources call empathetic reason, the ability to understand and negotiate with opposing views while keeping your own rational self-control.
But while we in the West are debating empathetic reason, the reality is that authoritarian regimes, China, Russia, Central Asia, are thriving. They're persistent. Why is autocracy so strategically resilient in those specific regions?
Well, you have to look at the historical and the geopolitical map. I mean, in a lot of these regions, the culture has historically equated order with strong state power.
Right, it's baked in.
It's baked in. This is rooted in centuries of large centralized bureaucracies that had to manage massive territories, often with multi-ethnic populations. The historical preference just favors order over freedom.
And the physical map matters too, I imagine.
Absolutely. The geopolitical factors are inescapable. I mean, consider many of these central states. They're vast, often landlocked, and historically surrounded by real and perceived security threats.
So they're always on defense.
Always. And that geographical constraint demands centralized strength, rapid mobilization, and national cohesion just to survive. You can contract that with insulated maritime states like Britain or Japan, which had a buffer of water. They had the luxury of allowing more internal political experimentation and diversity.
That makes autocracy sound almost like a necessary, if harsh, survival mechanism for certain geographies. But you brought up a really critical point that we can't miss. Autocracy isn't just a simple pre-stage we grow out of.
No, and this is the important nuance. Autocracy is cyclical. It doesn't just disappear when a society modernizes. When excessive freedom, political polarization, and division cause deep societal chaos, when institutions can't arbitrate disputes anymore, history shows that autocracy reappears.
Because people crave order.
People crave order, and they will consistently return to strong authority when the burden of self-governance and division just becomes unbearable. We even saw flashes of this in classical Athens.
That's a sobering thought. So let's pivot from that political reality to the philosophical ideals that maybe promise a path beyond this cycle. Our listener is interested in a really radical form of pluralism, specifically object-oriented ontology, or OOO, and new realism. What are these blueprints for ultimate diversity?
Okay, so these philosophies are immensely challenging to the human-centered worldview that's dominated for centuries. The core premise of OO is what they call ontological equality. It challenges the idea that human consciousness is the center of everything.
Wait, slow down there. If I'm just trying to figure out how to structure a government, what does it mean for a rock and a human to be ontologically equal? How does that translate to political reality for our listener?
Right, that's a necessary clarification. It means that the existence of the chair you're sitting on, the podcast microphone, and the human being speaking into it, they are all intrinsically real, irreducible, and equally valid objects in the universe. It pushes back against the belief that everything only matters in relation to human perception. And new realism follows a similar track, insisting on the acceptance of multiple truths that exist independently of our human minds.
That sounds like a radical form of political pluralism, where not just human values, but even non-human reality has to be factored into our decision-making.
It is the ultimate blueprint for a truly multi-valued civilization, but the prerequisite is monumental. It requires immense ethical maturity and, more to the point politically, the courage to relinquish the monopoly on correctness. You have to genuinely accept that your truth, your system, your state is just one among a massive field of equal existences.
Which immediately makes these philosophies completely incompatible with any authoritarian structure.
Entirely. Autocracies are fundamentally dependent on a single, unquestionable truth, the state ideology, to justify their stability and legitimacy. To acknowledge a fundamental philosophical pluralism is self-negation. It's a suicide note for the state.
And, as we discussed, even established Western democracies, which you'd think would be getting closer to this ideal, are struggling. We see social media fragmentation, massive economic disparity, political tribalism. It almost feels like the West is progressing towards self-division before it can even think about achieving non-human-centered thought.
We are still fighting the battles of the 20th century, not the 23rd. OA and new realism for now exist in the philosophical laboratory. They're blueprints for the next civilization, not immediate political solutions.
This brings us to the strength paradox. To survive in a world where autocracies prioritize military speed and centralized wealth, a diverse society has to prove it's strategically superior. So is diversity really a strength, or is it a hidden liability?
The arguments for diversity strategic superiority are powerful, and they kind of break down into three key views. The first is about military and strategic resilience.
Tell us about that.
Monolithic regimes. Think of centralized Soviet-era decision-making. They're fast in the short term, but they are incredibly brittle. They have single points of failure. Diversity, on the other hand, promotes strategic diversification and flexibility.
So disagreement is a good thing.
Disagreement, counterintuitively, fosters adaptability. It ensures that bad ideas are challenged quickly, which leads to long-term resilience. The sources often point to the highly diverse, immigrant-driven intellectual ecosystems that powered post-World War II U.S. innovation, or the military adaptation of places like Israel.
And economically, the argument is pretty well known.
Yeah.
Diversity is the mother of innovation.
Absolutely. I mean, the explosion of innovation in places like Silicon Valley was possible because it was a space of multinational, multi-religious, and multidisciplinary coexistence. Homogenous economies, especially those vast state-owned sectors, can be efficient, sure, but they rarely generate genuine paradigm-shifting innovation.
I see.
Diversity allows for risk to be dispersed across a network, ensuring failures are absorbed, but successes are amplified and shared across a wide base.
That sounds great in theory, but doesn't intense diversity often slow down decision-making, especially in a crisis? Is there a risk that flexibility just becomes paralysis?
That is the perfect challenge. Speed is the advantage of the autocrat. The response is that a diverse system sacrifices short-term speed for long-term depth and adaptability.
Okay.
The diverse system might take longer to decide on a direction, but when it does, that direction is usually robust because it has survived rigorous challenge. The monolithic regime is fast, but when it makes a mistake, the whole system can collapse.
And that brings us to the third view you mentioned, soft power.
Right. Societies that allow for diverse values are just inherently more flexible in diplomacy. They avoid falling into that monotheistic good versus evil dualism.
They see more gray areas.
Exactly. And that openness translates into greater international trust, superior negotiation leverage, and highly effective cultural diplomacy in a multipolar world. Cultural inclusiveness becomes a real strategic asset in forging alliances.
So we have a compelling case for diversity's strength. But history offers a terrifying counterargument, an example of diversity destroying itself, the Holy Roman Empire.
The HRE is the canonical warning against centerlessness. I mean, from the Peace of Westphalia until it dissolved, it was an empire with hundreds of sovereign principalities, varying religions, minimal imperial power, and deep internal divisions. It was structurally a centerless empire.
And it failed because it lacked that superior principle or strong mediator that we were talking about earlier.
Precisely. Lacking a superior binding framework, its diversity became its weakness. It was highly vulnerable to external pressure, constantly exploited by rising nation-states like France, and catastrophically prone to internal self-destruction.
The 30 Years' War.
The peak example is the 30 Years' War, which resulted in the deaths of perhaps a third of Central Europe's population. It was diversity turning inward and committing political suicide.
That is a stark lesson. Diversity without order or a strong mediating principle leads to collapse. And the result of that collapse was the modern nation-state model, the Westphalian system, which respects external diversity between states but demands fierce internal unity.
It was a necessary redesign. It proved that stability needs structure. So we've established that pure pluralism is structurally close to anarchy, and pure unity is autocracy. Therefore, a mediating structure is essential. We have to find the philosophical compromise.
And this is where we turn to the foundational thinkers who were dealing with similar societal chaos during Europe's religious wars, Descartes and Kant.
Their strategies really provide the philosophical bridge. Descartes offered the strategy of distance.
How does methodological doubt help a pluralistic society?
Well, Descartes used methodological doubt to create a safe space for reason. Crucially, he distanced himself from the emotional and religious chaos that was all around him. Applied politically, coexistence requires this calm separation. You aren't trying to convert your neighbor or even fully understand or agree with their deepest values. You maintain a non-interfering distance. And this calm separation is often far more stable than relying purely on exhausting empathy. It's like hitting the mute button on emotional conflict.
So Descartes gives us the space to breathe. And then Kant provides the strategy of inclusion, the necessary framework.
Yes. Kant proposed universal principles rooted purely in reason, the categorical imperative. This framework is designed to prevent diverse freedoms from colliding and leading to conflict. You can think of the categorical imperative as a kind of rational, universally enforceable traffic law for society.
It's the minimum common ground.
It sets the non-negotiable floor for mutual recognition. Human rights, fundamental legal principles, shared due process. This framework protects diversity by preventing its extreme elements from tearing the whole structure down.
So the ideal political translation of philosophical pluralism is found in this intermediate structure. Descartes provides the calm distance to avoid conflict, and Kant provides the rational principles to secure consensus. That strategic compromise is the philosophical bridge toward sustainable pluralism.
Precisely. It's stability through rational self-restraint.
Let's pivot to the cutting edge of theory. We acknowledge that most modern critiques like New Marxism, which is fantastic for analyzing power structures and structural inequality, are, well, a bit weak on governance design. They critique the diversity-order tension but don't fully overcome it.
True. They explain the problem brilliantly but struggle to design a solution that avoids either the centralized state or, collapse. But there are some emerging theoretical directions that try to overcome this by shifting the focus from static structure to dynamic function.
Give us the first one. Bruno Latour and actor network theory.
Latour fundamentally reframes order. He argues that stability isn't a fixed, inherited thing. It's a constant, never-ending process of translation and readjustment among all actors, human and non-human.
So it's always in motion.
Always. Stability is achieved through dynamic, continuous renewal. Society doesn't fall apart because negotiation is always happening, involving everyone and everything.
So stability isn't a ceiling we reach, it's the constant act of balancing. And Niklas Luhmann's social system theory offers a functional approach to centerlessness, right?
Luhmann provides the systemic architecture for this. He argues that order is maintained not by a single ideological center, but by functional differentiation. Society operates as a collection of autonomous subsystems, politics, economy, science, religion, that link up functionally, but none of them hold an overriding command position.
So if Luhmann says there's no single center, does that mean the government is just another subsystem, no more important than the economy or science?
Yes, exactly. In his view, the political system is functionally differentiated. It handles political problems, but it can't dictate the rules of the economic system, and vice versa. This model allows for a kind of centerless stability because the subsystems are interdependent but autonomous.
And finally, Hart-and-Negri's concept of the common provides the economic justification for this decentralized strength.
They connect diversity directly to productivity. They argue that network-based cooperation and the sharing of knowledge and culture, what they call the commonwealth, is the new basis of production. For them, diversity itself is the strongest economic capital. It justifies pluralism not just morally, but through its decentralized, superior productive power.
So when we synthesize Latour with his dynamic renewal, Luhmann with functional differentiation, and Hart-and-Negri with their decentralized capital, we arrive at this proposed dynamic decentralized functional order model. This is the theoretical attempt to achieve stable pluralism without relying on a strong central sovereign.
It is the most advanced theoretical framework we have for stable, pluralistic societies. It's the attempt to learn the lessons of the Holy Roman Empire. That structure is needed, but replacing a static structure with functional interdependence and continuous negotiation.
This brings us full circle. Whether we look at classical philosophy or modern theory, the ultimate wisdom for achieving a strong, diverse society is never the pursuit of pure, uncompromising, anarchic ideals.
Never. The historical and strategic imperative demands the construction of a necessary compromise. The strength of a diverse society lies in its rational self-restraint, in knowing precisely what common rules must be upheld and what distances must be maintained to ensure diversity doesn't devour itself.
And that leads us to our final provocative thought for you to mull over. If the strategic compromise of Descartes' rational distance and Kant's universal common ground is indeed the stable point, consider how this model of reasoned self-control could be practically applied to brand new challenges in the current international order. For instance, establishing the necessary ethical guidelines for autonomous artificial intelligence, or managing systemic competition in a truly multipolar world where no single state holds that ultimate mediating power.
This program is provided by Universal Genesis.